September 29th, 2022. Stress Level Zero's newest title, Bonelab, was released on the Oculus Quest 2 and PC VR. A highly anticipated sequel for their previous title, Boneworks, the community had high expectations. The game itself received mixed reviews from the community, with some saying it's an incredible VR experience, and others saying that it's nothing like its predecessor. However, Bonelab did include a feature that many community members were highly excited about: native mod support. Stress Level Zero's support of the modding community facilitated an instant explosion in mods for the game, and things were going smoothly until people started to get bored. Some said the game was dying and would stop being relevant within a few months. You see, one key aspect that the game lacked was multiplayer. With the heavily sandbox-oriented gameplay, players often felt a sense of boredom or loneliness when trying to entertain themselves post-campaign, myself included. However, one man took it upon himself to fix this problem, and assembled a team in order to single-handedly save Stress Level Zero's newest title. This is the making of Bonelab Fusion.
Hello, I'm Electirc. The way Fusion originally got started was with entanglement with Boneworks, because back in 2021, there was another Boneworks multiplayer mod, but it had stopped being developed. And then one of my friends, Z-Cube, decided to start working on entanglement, and I said, hey, I could help probably. He started with the networking foundations. I started making all the messages for like player positions and stuff. And eventually he kind of fell away from the project, but I kept keeping it going until I released it. But in the end, I was kind of unsatisfied with it, and I decided that for Bonelab, I wanted to try and recode it from the ground up to be like a new multiplayer mod.
I'm Alex the Baba Corp, whatever it is you want to like say. And the place I guess would be starting with Fusion was a while ago for like Boneworks modding wise, because that's when I met Electirc, and in Boneworks it was like I'd make items and he'd help me and stuff, and I was testing entanglement for a while, which was like mod before Fusion. Pre-Bonelab, Electirc had the idea for Fusion for a while, so I was like already a tester for a while.
So I was in the Boneworks Discord server, it's now called the Bonelab Discord server, for a long time. I've known Electirc from that server, and Alex, the Baba, obviously. I noticed that the Entanglement Discord was made, so I joined it, and I noticed that Alex, Mr. Gaming, Electirc, all those guys were chilling in a room VC. I joined in to like see what they were up to, so I did. It kind of just like snowballed from there, started talking more often, obviously. Then the development of Fusion came around, and Electirc said that he wanted to make game modes, you know, TDM, deathmatch, all that stuff. I had already done music for his VR project, LVR, but it was kind of like a joke thing. He made a joke game mode, and I made some silly tunes for it, which was actually, it's actually music that was included in the OST, in the Fusion OST. It's a synthetic Caverns track. He just decided to put it in as like a silly little reference.
I have known Electirc for like 3 years now, and I originally was a tester for Entanglement. I met Electirc on the Boneworks multiplayer server a very long time ago, and I just naturally became a tester for Entanglement because I was friends with him, and he got everyone who was a tester for Entanglement to become an tester for Fusion. That's how I got there.
I got the idea for the name Fusion because I wanted it to have Quest support, so I was going to use Photon Fusion. But whenever Bonelab inevitably came out, that ended up not working, so I resorted to Steam networking. It wasn't really fully coordinated in the sense of we had like a plan. We kind of, as we went along, we kind of thought of cool ideas for the mod and just added them, because this is a passion project after all. I kind of just created it because I wanted multiplayer in a physics VR game, because Bonelab and Boneworks are the only ones that have like this kind of interaction in VR with like full physics bodies, and because of that there's also no other multiplayer games, so I mainly just made it because I wanted something to have like multiplayer with. One half of that is of course my experience from Entanglement and learning from the mistakes I made and what I could do better. The other half of that is a lot of Bonelab's improvements. With Boneworks, it wasn't really designed for any kind of multiplayer at all, but with Bonelab, they've actually made it so that the player is more modular, which means you can remove and add more things to it, which made it a lot easier to... With Entanglement, the players were just the model and some colliders. With Bonelab Fusion, the players are the actual player, which is why you can see the holsters and you can holster things at other people and grab them and stuff. Entanglement was built entirely around Discord, which eventually, as you know, stopped supporting their networking services. So because of that, with Fusion, I decided to write a networking layer system. I didn't have much networking experience, which is kind of what I learned with Entanglement. Way before Boneworks released, I had learned some basic programming languages such as Python. Eventually, whenever Boneworks came out, I got into Boneworks modding. And then a year later, whenever Entanglement started, I had gotten pretty used to developing in C#. And that's when I had to learn how to do the networking side of things. I'm still not very good at, I think, but I'm still learning. So if you do something before or after them, you can also completely change the game function itself. So one of the reasons why Fusion wasn't able to be put onto Quest for a long time was because of Lemon Loader having a Harmony patch limit, because Fusion has a lot of Harmony patches. It changes a lot of different parts of the game to work with the code. So like, for example, there was a lot of things we encountered with adding another player causing things like, because you understand how Bonelab loads its scenes in chunks for quest optimization, but whenever there was another player in the scene, that would sometimes cause chunks to just randomly unload and you would fall out. And then also with multiple players, sometimes different like triggers stop working and a lot of events would break. So it was mostly having to kind of change a lot of how the game functions to expect there to be multiple players is one of the main things that really lasted over the entire development process. Alex the Bubble made pretty much all of the custom models and effects for Fusion. First, I had to put the bitmart into Unity so I could set up the colliders and stuff. And what took a lot of the development of the bitmart was the UI, because Stress Level 0 already has a UI system, but I couldn't get that to work, so I had to make my own basic one with touchscreen and clicking. Now, something that took a while was getting the cosmetics to work with most avatars, because as you know, avatars vary wildly in proportions. So I had to get a system so I could get snapping points onto the body, like the top of the head and the face and such, so I could snap the cosmetics to the different parts of the body. And it still sometimes doesn't work with some avatars. BrandonJLA on Twitter said that Bonelab is going to have support for 2 years, so I want to make sure that Fusion gets updates throughout that 2 years at the minimum, and maybe a little bit after that. I guess one more thing I could talk about is the difference between my motivation for this project and my motivation for Entanglement. Whenever Entanglement came out, we released it in like a pretty early stage, and we were gonna like keep updating it till it was finished. But that ended up draining a lot of my motivation because of people constantly asking for when a new update will come out. With Fusion, kept it in secret for most of its development, and we slowly revealed features as it went on. And I think that helped to release it in like a fully polished state, because that helped me just not care about what other people were asking me to do and really just like finish the project. And by the time I was done, I was really happy with where it was. Of course, I need to have a few more updates after launch to fix some bugs and add some more features that people have requested. But I've just generally had a lot more motivation to actually finish Fusion.
Everything I've made basically for Fusion relates to the bitmart, which was kind of just started as a joke. A little later into October, it became like kind of like a joke idea of having like this point shop system, kind of like a Gmod surfers would. And that's kind of how I got into the whole point shop thing. I was like, okay, that'd be actually kind of a cool idea, and that became like an actual part of Fusion. Originally meeting him was definitely like small interactions in the Boneworks Discord when it was like originally Boneworks Discord. When I actually like got into like meeting him and talking with him a lot, and, like working with him more and stuff, and he'd like help me out more and stuff. All that was after custom NPCs were getting made for Boneworks, and I was really interested in that because it's kind of like a crazy new thing. I just made custom items for a while, and NPCs were like this whole different category of thing that was being made, and it was super complex at the time. It's like pretty basic to think of now. Electirc was like the only one that really like knew a lot about custom NPCs, so it's like kind of led to me getting into like a server with like him and a few of the others, like Mr. Gaming and stuff, who also tested Fusion and Entanglement. All of that kind of wound up leading to here. So really just custom NPCs, I would say, is like the linking node between everyone. I just made mostly custom items, but I think NPCs was like something I wanted to look at for a little bit, and I made like a couple of ones where just like characters I'd like from games, and then over time it kind of became like, oh, these are just Ford reskins, and it's not that great. And I was a lot more interested in like mapping and custom items, which I guess led into wanting to make the kind of items of Fusion. I originally got into 3D modeling for just VR chat avatars. I just made VR chat avatars, like, and even then I was like doing very light modeling. Like, I guess looping back to today is like I would just do like, oh, I want a hat on my guy, so I'd make my guy a little hat, and I just use like a model from like a game I liked, because it's kind of what I would always use in VR chat if I did play it. But 3D modeling has been like a thing that I was into like since even before I really got into it. I was always like, oh, I really want to like make things in Blender. And then for a while, Blender, I opened it and I was like, oh, that UI is terrifying. And then they released like 2.8 and they fixed the UI up a lot. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll use that now. Maps like this for like the basic deathmatch maps. We wanted to do like a couple of them, that way it wouldn't release and then there'd be nothing. Because then it'd be like, oh man, that's kind of bad if you want to play deathmatch. So for deathmatch maps, they're like pretty basic as you can see. So it's just Unity and Pro Builder in Unity, which is like a program that lets you like build out blocks in Unity without having to go from Blender to Unity to like Substance Painter. Asset-wise, making them, like I think for things like the bitmart or like the hats, how it would go is I would use Krita originally and sketch out like some ideas, like for the bitmart and also for the info box as well. I draw out a little design. I'd write like, maybe inspired by for the info boxes like airport terminals or loan machines and stuff. And it's like, so all this, once I'd get all that down, I would put the sketch in Blender and basically model over it using booleans and stuff, like real simple, and then I would remesh that so it'd become like more optimized later. Definitely like once it started getting the ball rolling, it was like kind of just on it, like most free time was like, oh, here's a build, test this, here's a build, test this, that's broken, do this. Me as like a tester was just like mostly that, and Lactrez was always hard at work, like making stuff constantly. My motivation mostly, because I was working at other stuff at the same time, I was like doing other things of course, and it was never taking up like all of my time what I was doing. And I can't like speak for others of course, but I don't think it was ever becoming like too much of like a hassle through anyone's lives, like, oh, I've got to keep working at this thing. It kind of did stay like, oh, we should keep working on this, but like we can take our time with it, because we're trying to get like a good product thing at the end. So it's like, it's gonna take a little bit of time at least. And staying motivated is just like, everyone's kind of moving around things very frequently. There'd be like a little bit where it's like, oh, you're stuck on one thing for a little bit, but for most of the time it's like, oh, doing this, and then you're switching to this, and then you're working on this a little bit. It was never like one feature, working on that for like days at a time. One feature, there's kind of like mixed bag of things, and of course like as you're making something, this other like issue's gonna come in, and as much as like, oh damn it, we've got another thing to fix. Lactrez was like from the start, like he's like done like everything, like all like the code stuff for like all of that. He's like 100% into that. Most other people like me and 172 such like Tarf, as odd as it sounds to say, we weren't like originally part of like the production plan thing. It just kind of became a thing. It's like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we had these, or wouldn't it be cool if we had these? And Lactrez, he's like super like crazy experienced code-wise. He can make like models and music, but like models is something that I've done for like quite some time, and music's something 172's done for quite some time. So it just became like, okay, if we're gonna have like all this crazy shit, we should like go out to other people kind of thing. So it's like became like, I worked on the models, 172 got on the music, and then Lactrez is all like the coding. And he organizes like everything pretty much. The real only challenges were sometimes he'd be like, I have never modeled a shape like this in my life, like the hard hat item that there was in the game. I've never made like a rounded helmet thing with like extrusions at the top. It wasn't hard, it was just like, oh, I've never done that. Mapping wise, was Fusion maps, like the deathmatch maps I made, were way smoother mapping wise for me to make than like some of my sandbox maps I make, because for a few years I had only looked at like, how to make deathmatch maps, doing this, like how does like Activision do their deathmatch maps, how are CS deathmatch maps made. So I had like a lot of information of like how those were like laid out, and like what you kind of want to like make, like build around, how do you want like the routing to be for that. With the deathmatch maps, this one being like the first one, it was just this like this top area, this whole wide space wasn't here. It became like we would play on it a couple times because of course we wanted to like test and be sure it's fun, and it was fun. And there just wasn't a lot of variety sometimes in certain areas, so it'd be like, oh, here's a good idea, and then I'd kind of like add that or like think of a way to do this and add it to the map, and it'd be like, oh yeah, this is a lot nicer. And all the other testers was like really useful, like saying stuff that was like kind of odd or like if it was fun and stuff. So it was really good to have like a group of people to like be like, hey, this is what should be and what shouldn't be. I wasn't particularly like challenged with anything, I don't think. And even down like the hats, I did like the like 40 or like 30 whatever hats there are. I think it was in like a few days for the hats. I just sat down for like a couple of like 3 nights in a row. I'd just be like, from 8 p.m. to like 3 a.m. I would just do like, here's 10 hats, here's 10 hats, here's 10 hats, and just like pretty quickly work them out. And it's like they're all like reasonably low poly. I think that's the most I've modeled like ever, was in those like couple of nights. It was just like pumping things out. I had a lot of ideas for like cosmetics I'd want. It's like a lot of them are inspired from like movies, TV, and like games and stuff. The whole idea for the cosmetics system was originally inspired by the Gmod servers. There would be point shop menus you could open up and like buy hats for your guy, buy trails for your guy. Oh, hats are fun. Let's have hats. There might only be like 2 hats that aren't inspired by something. My favorites, I guess if I want to list my favorite cosmetics, there's the shiny shades, which are inspired by Back to the Future 2, which is like supposed to be like it's kind of similar to the sunglasses that Doc is wearing. Also, there's the item called the green cap, which was it's inspired by the hat that Eno wears in Dream Barbecue, which is an unreleased like indie game, which is really fun. It hasn't affected me like outside of like online stuff like at all really. There's like one time when I was still in high school where someone was like, oh my god, you made 7-Eleven for Boneworks, and that was really weird. Other than that, it was just like, it's been like mostly normal. It is definitely strange though if I'm like I'll be in a Discord for like a complete different community, and I'll get a DM that's like, oh my god, are you BabaCorp? And it's like, oh yeah, I am. It's like weird when people find me like that. I'm glad to be like seen as like a good modder, because it's kind of like something that's been like I've wanted to be for a while, I guess. So when it's like, oh, that guy makes cool stuff. I guess if there is something I do want to shout out, it'd be that people should look at Ina. It's weird, it's a fun little thing, and I enjoy it a lot.
Once he came to me, or brought up the idea of game modes, I thought to myself, hey, it'd be kind of funny if I, made tunes for that. And he was like, oh, sure, you can go ahead and make a few. Or I said I was going to make a few. I ended up making 15. The first track I finished was Wacky Woolly's Wonderland. That was the first track I did. At that point, I didn't really have a vision for what I wanted to do. I was just kind of like throwing stuff together. The whole thing about Wacky Wooly is that he's kind of a character I envisioned in my mind, personally, to help me transfer the stuff that was in my head better onto kind of like an audio form. And I did that for a lot of the tracks, so that was really cool. About the music stuff before that I've been doing tons of solo stuff for like 3 or 4 years now. I have tons of projects. I don't really release them. I want to, but I don't really do it often. I've been playing guitar for like a year and a half now. Obviously with Fusion, this is like obviously in the future, duh. I got way better at doing stuff. I got way better at creating melodies, structuring stuff. And obviously I was able to just be kind of free and just do whatever I wanted, just make a bunch of silly, funny stuff, because that's what I kind of envisioned Fusion as. Just a fun party time, la 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 with all your friends and stuff. It's really fun. About the inclusion of Smiggles. Smiggles is my cat, like my actual cat that I've had for about 2 months, and I also used him as a way to think of tracks in my mind and put them out and stuff. So that's where Smiggles in Despair comes from. Obviously, I've already stated this in text, but that was supposed to be like a Smiggles boss fight theme, because I thought that'd be a really funny scenario to kind of create. With the Lava Gang team, I tried to use more like soft pianos and more like orchestrated stuff, also a mix of a cool electronic arpeggiating stuff. And then with the Saber Lake, obviously they're more evil, so I tried to use more like, in a different kind of like chord progression, kind of like eviler sounding, combined with like dark processed industrial beats, stuff like that. And like obviously more in tune to the style of like Boneworks tracks, like differentiate the different teams, like, oh, Saber Lake are like these bad guys trying to, stop the creative flow of freedom. and then Lava Gang on the other side here, trying to be free and break the chains and just be completely creative and just build wherever they want. Normally when I create tracks, I begin with, so I have a plugin called Addictive Drums too. Very great plugin. So basically what I do is I layer the drums in a way that kind of has them all like fit together, and then obviously I combine that with cool samples. With like Cyclic Bug Initiative and App and Vuge, I used like speedcore kick samples that I put effects over, and I put them under the kicks of the MIDI drum track, obviously. And combined with that, I think it sounds really, really cool. It makes the drums sound very, very like, it sounds like they're harmonizing very, very well together. I finish the drum track, and then what I usually do is I have two different ways of approaching it. I either do cool chords, like, oh, this might be like a cool chord progression, and I put together like something, and then I get another pattern that's just a lead that is on top of it, that's maybe like a square wave or something that's like a, oh, this would be good to like lead and harmonize with the bass melody. And then I don't really do the bass until I finish a lot of the track, I've noticed. Sometimes I'll even like rearrange that order and I'll do guitars after I put down the drums. Cause I have like 15 different pedals on my pedal board and like 4 amps that I just love to mess around with. Like I have a bit crusher pedal, synth pedal, there's one called like, yeah, Tensor that completely fucks up the sound. It sounds so cool. And I love to incorporate those weird pedals into the music because I think it fits with the freedom and creative nature of the game, obviously, and the modding idea. I don't know, to be honest, I kind of get into like a zone where I just do it, and it just works. My main issue is that I will make a 20-second, 30-second loop of something that I think sounds cool, and I won't know how to go from that to like a new part. That's my issue. Like, obviously, once I get into the zone, I'm like, oh, this should sound like this. It just works. I probably have like 20 or 30 different projects of like music that I was doing for Fusion, but it's just like a little loop. I think it'd be kind of cool to like release them, but obviously it won't be like a huge thing. It's just like, oh, little like 30-second little tune. Because some of them actually sound really cool. It's just, I kind of get into like a rut. I'm not very good at structuring game music. I more so structure like solo projects and stuff like as if it was like an actual like cinematic or like real like solo like actual like music that would be on like Spotify or something. Which obviously it's not the way I structured Fusions. I kind of have like 2 zones that I switch into, like, oh, do I want to do this for like a game or for someone to like listen to on like a CD player or something. Sometimes I would create something cool that sounded really cool and I would stream it in the VC. Alex and Legatrez would obviously be there. There was never something that they would be like, oh, this doesn't fit or this doesn't sound good. They were aware that I was just being free, and I assume they both wanted me to be free and just creatively just express myself throughout the music, which is what I did, and I think it worked out very well. Sometimes they would give me ideas, like Alex gave me the idea of sampling the end of the MythOS PDA thing. I mashed the Operator OCM melody, that's it, the do-no-no-no-no-no, and then also obviously sampled bits from that runoff jingle. It's kind of funny because there was no planning. We just kind of did it. Okay, when I say no planning, I mean like there's no like intricate planning, like, okay, this happens here. This is like the timeline of when we're going to work on this or this, whatever. It was obviously just ideas that were thrown into the air, and then we didn't choose to act on them via like a timeline, is what I'm trying to say. I will say one thing about the inspiration. The main things that influence me personally, I'm into a wide like spread of music. I like a lot of music. Sometimes I listen to John Coltrane, like jazz stuff, and then I like other bands like Slipknot, Korn, Linkin Park, just like new metal. I love metal, and I love punk rock too. Like biggest influence for me personally is the Mad Capsule Markets, which is actually a pretty niche Japanese band that fuses techno beats and like techno synths, which are so awesome, with the chaotic energy of punk rock. So they have like guitars and stuff, and the drum tone is so good. If you listen to their 010 album, you can tell that the drum tone that they had very, very influenced me because it is so good. Stuff like that. It's just a super cool band.
Well, back in Entanglement, it was mainly, we'd load into main menu, we'd go to the corner of the room, we'd grab a crowbar to test physics sync. I remember when that was first added, that would become a test that we'd do every time. And that was very, very memorable, because we used to do that all the fucking time. But we did that, then I think the progression was for entanglement. I don't remember what it was fully, but I think it was finger curls before physics sync was added, and then it was plan models, and then it was physics sync, and then all the other stuff for entanglement. But for fusion, I don't really remember what got added when and why, but it was about the same testing process. We'd load it to halfway park and we'd just start grabbing stuff. It would be void G11.4, where we'd grab the cones to test physics sync, and then we'd go into halfway park to test everything else usually. To coordinate everything, it was just in the entanglement server, or it was originally the entanglement server. We renamed the entanglement server to the fusion server, and then there was some fusion chats added for testers, where we'd post like testing files, because we would test certain mods to see if they worked. Like we tested the helicopter, we tested Rex Mex guns and stuff like that. We would just post stuff in there to kind of just see if they worked. It was kind of just like a fun thing I tested on the side. It didn't really affect me too much, because I kind of just like get home, I'd see lectures in VC and we'd hop in and we'd test. That's usually what just happened. I think seats had an issue at one point. Magazines had some issues, like some pretty bad ones at some point, but they're all fixed now. I don't remember if this one's fixed yet. This might still be an issue, but it's infinite velocity when you grab onto another player at the same time as them grabbing you. Like you and another player would grab each other, and you would just start building up like infinite speed. You'd like fly up into the air. It was crazy. It's much more polished than it was back then, 100%. I would ask Lack for certain features, like a lot. It was something with name tags I asked. It was like font choices and stuff like that, just like small things like that we'd have like input on, or the testers would talk about. So originally, when Lack was deving, there are 2 different fonts that he was thinking of using. Originally he had a different one, but he ended up using nasalization, which is the current one you can see. But yeah, he'd ask for like input on stuff like that. The creation of Junction, it's kind of a crazy thing. Like Junction, the other multiplayer mod that someone else was working on. Swipers was developing Bonelab multiplayer mockup, and then Junction, which was an alright product. I've spoke to Swipers a decent amount of times. There's no like hard feelings about it, but it did cause, I think it caused Lakshaz some sort of like just kind of annoyance, which is understandable, but like both thought the other one didn't like them, I guess. I don't know. They had some sort of like notion that the other did not like the other, if you understand. So Swipers would speak about how he thought Lack didn't like him, and Lack thought Swipers didn't like him. But when I'd speak to them both about it, they'd say that they were fine with the other. So I guess it kind of just like made the illusion of drama rather than like actual drama. He now owns the Fusion extension server, which is like people who make like multiplayer extensions for their maps and stuff like that and mods, which is kind of chill. He likes Fusion. He's now stopped developing Junction, I believe. I don't know, I think Fusion's just about as perfect as it can be at the moment, other than certain bugs. It's very, very, very polished, has some good features. But yeah, soon there's going to be server names, which is going to be pretty cool. It's coming soon.